Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and today I want to talk about the Atelier games. Now, the Atelier games, although you may not have actually heard of, is weirdly enough one of the longest running game series out there right now. Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and today I want to talk about the Atelier game series, and it's a series you probably have not actually heard of, although you may have, but in actual fact, it's one of the longest running game series out there. Yes, it's not up there with the big boys like Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, Legend of Zelda, and so on, but it's actually a game series that has spanned several decades at this point. Now, if you have seen an Atelier game, you probably have this image of what it actually is like, or if you've played Atelier games, then you truly know what it's like. I'm a 40-year-old man, and I don't know whether it's acceptable for me to be playing Atelier games. To give some context to this is the very first Atelier game I ever played, and this is Atelier Sophie. This, in and of itself, got me into the series. Look at it. I wonder if this will focus. Do you see it? What sort of game do you imagine when you see this? Well, my wife says, well, it's a kiddie sort of game. Okay, fair enough. What about if you see this? It looks like a kiddie game, maybe. Maybe not quite as much. But then, what about this? Does that look like a kiddie game to you? Probably not quite as much. Now, the idea what I'm trying to get to here is next year we have two new Atelier games coming out. One is Atelier Resleriana and the other is Atelier Yumia. Now, Yumia in itself looks much more mature than any of the other Atelier games that we've had before. And that shows an evolution in the series, maybe towards a more mature audience. Not necessarily someone like me, but more grown up who's moved with the series over time. Yes, I've not been with the series for too many years. If my first entry was Sophie years ago, then obviously I didn't play when these came out on PS3. You know, these are all something that I've picked up over the last couple of months because I've truly got into the series and I want to play even more. Currently, I've played 7 of the Atelier games and there are more than 20 in the mainline series. It's a series that is not going to end, but it's a series that doesn't have much attention and much focus, and that's sad, because to me, I feel it's a very relaxed and unique type of game. It's about alchemy mostly, although in the newer versions of it, it's not quite about the alchemy as much as it used to be. And what I mean by that is when we look at Atelier Ryza. Now, Atelier Ryza is probably what propelled the Atelier series into a bit more mainstream, we could say. Obviously not as mainstream as some of the other type of games, like, for example, Tales or Trails. It's not as mainstream as them. It probably never will be, but there are more of these out there and about than the likes of a Tales game. Is it the same style? Well, yes and no. It's mainly a more relaxed focus. Like I said, if you go into a Tales game, you play it, there's a lot of combat, a lot of action. Yes, the Atelier games have combat, they have action, but they are so much more relaxed and peaceful about it all. It's a game that you can sit and play and just relax and not have to think too much until you get to the point where you've got to look into things like recipes to create things from your cauldron. That's where the alchemy comes into it. And it can be a bit tricky. And I think that's where a lot of newcomers to the Atelier series do struggle. Where do they begin in all of this? There's so many games. Which are the easiest to work out? Which are the hardest? Okay, look. Atelier Ryza, Atelier Ryza 2, and I've lost it now, Atelier Ryza 3, are probably the 3 easiest games to get into because the alchemy system in that is probably the easiest. I can't say too much for the likes of these early PS3 ones, although looking at them, I'd be able to understand not a problem because I've played the Mysterious quadrilogy as it is now. Now, this is where things get a little bit more complicated. So, with the likes of Sophie, this is the Mysterious quadrilogy, originally a trilogy. However, that then evolved into Atelier Firis, Lydian Suelle, and then finally, Sophie 2. And for reference, Sophie 2 is my favourite Atelier game. The alchemy, how it works in those 4 games, is different from how it works in Riser. Riser, like I said, is easier to pick up, and that is the Secret Trilogy, or the Riser Trilogy, because all 3 are based upon Riser. If you go further back to the likes of Iris on the PS2, I haven't personally played that. Again, I've seen videos. I unfortunately don't even own it at this point. I will do one day. The alchemy system in that is different once again, and it's just something that you get used to and evolve with over time. So if you were into the Atelier series 20 years ago, you've probably got no problem with how the new alchemy systems work throughout the games. When we come to the new games, for example, Yumiya, which is likely to be the first one out next year, I would imagine that the alchemy system in that is going to be based on Riser, but easier once again, because they want people to come into this series as much as possible. And what better place to start than a new trilogy or new quadrilogy? Atelier Yumiya. From there, you can backtrack, but backtracking may be difficult. But either way, who are these games aimed at? Well, if we look at some of these, let me see if I can find the right one here, because I have them all out. I believe it was Atelier Totori. Now, if you Google this particular game, you'll find that the rating for one version of this game in Australia is horrendous. You can see here, hopefully it focuses, it's rated 12, Peggy 12 here in Europe, and I believe it's rated T for teen over in the United States. The Australian ratings board is a little bit different. They are notoriously useless, we could say. I think useless is the right word to use. And they tend to put things on for no reason or ban games for no reason. I believe something like Fallout 3 was originally going to be banned in Australia because of something within the game. But Totori has, I'm not going to say the words here. I have mentioned it in a previous video. It's to do with the content of the game and the nature of it. But if you do a quick Google search for Atelier Totori meme, you should find out what I'm on about. And clearly, once you've done that and had a look at this and understood what the Australian ratings board did, you'll think, what the hell were they on about? That is clearly not anything like what the Australian ratings board seemed to think. So, where should you start with the Atelier series if you want to get into it? Well, honestly, everyone has a different opinion. Everyone has a different point. They say, oh, look at all these, where should you start? Realistically, I would say start where I started, which would be Sophie. But then, would you be able to go back and play some of the older games, like the Dusk trilogy, or would you be able to play the Ireland quadrilogy? Who knows? So maybe start with Rorona, if you've got a PS3, that is. Now, this, personally, I've seen people play, I've watched videos, that's how I knew I wanted to play this. And to me, this looks a lot of fun. I'm going to get around to this real soon. But maybe that's a starting point. What I wouldn't recommend is starting with something like Riser 2 or Sophie 2 or Lydian Suelle. Although you can, by all means, it's probably not the best place to start because you'll miss out on part of the story. So always try and start at the beginning of a trilogy or quadrilogy. As I said, my recommendation would be Sophie. Atelier games, I think, are never going to slow down in what they do, how they are, how they play. They may grow a little bit more mature, like I say with Yumiya, how it looks to be a bit more of an older protagonist, and I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be really, really good. But what the future holds for the Atelier games, who knows, but I'm excited to find out. What do you think of them? Have you played them? Do you intend to play them? Can you play them? Do you think there's too many? Are you worried of trying to catch up with all this backlog? I was, but I'm happy with it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.